This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic! What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is June 3rd, 2024. Jonathan Osborne here, joined by my co-host Luke Sylvia in an undisclosed location. Luke, what is going on, man?
Oh, man. Just moved into a house. NCAA Football 25 gameplay trailer released as well. A lot of content that I've been watching there. That's, I think, July 19th is a release date for that. So everything's great, man. Being a first-time homeowner, and then everything else that is chaotic and exciting about that all is coming with it right now.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to college football 25. I know I'm not like the biggest college football fan, as you know that, but the video game, to me, like, I always played the NCAA football games as a kid. So I'm looking forward to that release. However, when that releases, I'm going to be like in the middle of a golf trip. So like, as much as I just want to be home, like playing that game that day, I won't be able to play it until that Monday. But thankfully, I always have the foresight to take off an extra day when I get back from vacation, so that like you don't get home and like, oh my gosh, I have to work the next day. I always book that day after buffer. Like that is a pro-life hack for vacationing. So the 22nd, that Monday, I'll just be able to spend the whole day playing college football 25. So that'll be good.
Yeah, it'll be electric. It looks great. It looks fast, and that's what we need. We need it to look fast like it used to. It needs to play at a faster pace than Madden. They needed to make it as much as unlike Madden as possible, and they did that. Like, it looks awesome. So it seems promising, and Madden might be saying goodbye to a lot of their typical players for sure.
So I haven't had the opportunity to watch that gameplay trailer that came out yesterday or the day before, whenever that was. What to you, like, what were the highlights from that? Is there anything maybe missing from this game that you were hoping that they would include? Like, what's your takeaway so far?
The only thing that you could say that they're missing is in Road to Glory. So like, basically, if you're familiar with 2K as listeners, like, it's basically my player.
Road to Glory storyline.
Yeah. Road to Glory, typically, like, it used to include playing in high school, like your senior year, but they don't have that this year, at least as far as we know, and I think it might have been confirmed. So there's none of that. And honestly, that's like, even if you're nitpicking, like, that's the only thing that you hear and you think like, oh man, maybe I wish they would have had that. But on top of that, man, like, they've got it nailed. Like they've got basically badges that players have to kind of separate themselves from other players, and as well as, like, it's not like a game breaker. It's not like they can do no wrong. From what I have heard, like, it doesn't ruin the game. It just makes them better in those areas, but they're not like a cheat code with those certain things. I'm sure there's going to be players that are cheat codes, and that's just part of the game. There's so many players, it's inevitable that there's going to be some unbalanced players for sure. But they nailed that. Like, there's a lot that more than they nailed than what I wish, like, that they would have added. And I think that really, like, that's just nitpicking as far as what they could have added. But I mean, it looks awesome. The atmosphere looks awesome. They've got traditions in the game from colleges and stuff. I'm interested to see. Florida fans will know about this for sure. But at the beginning of the fourth quarter, they play Won't Back Down by Tom Petty, and the whole crowd sings it with their phone lights on. I'm interested to see if that's in the game, because they have other cool traditions in the game. And as a Gator fan, I would love to see that. But we'll see. We'll see what it looks like. But man, it's going to be a lot of fun.
What's going to be the first school that you fire up with the Dynasty mode? Have you already, like, made a decision, or are you going to wait to see?
Yeah, the school that I always took to the promised land was the New Mexico State Lobos. So New Mexico State, that's probably who we're taking to the promised land. And we'll see what we can do. It's going to be interesting.
And then after that, are you moving? Are you leaving for Florida?
I think we gotta. I'll probably set a precedent of how many national championships I have to win with them before I just jump ship and go to where all the money is to recruit players and whatever else. That's an aspect that's going to be a lot of fun to see. The money aspect. We'll see if it ruins it, but I think it'll be fun.
You'll get with your staff. Obviously, you'll talk to your family, and you'll make whatever decision you feel like is going to be best for you, not only you, but the future of both programs, right?
Yeah. Please respect my decision is what I'll tell people for sure.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to today's episode. So the last few shows we spent going through the different player position groups. We went through the guards first, then the centers, and then we talked about the forwards on the last episode. Only thing really left to do is just talk a little bit more about the Magic staff. We're going to talk about Jamahl Mosley, and then we'll talk just more generally about the front office, Jeff Weltman and Anthony Parker, especially, but just really talk about the front office as a whole there. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing today. We're going to again be talking about what we're grading Jamahl Mosley in the front office based off of sort of like what our expectations were going into the year. Let's start with Jamahl Mosley, Luke, and I wanted to list out some statistics here just to, jog our memory a little bit. It's been, almost about a month since the season ended now, about 4 weeks from today as we're recording this. So just wanted to go back and jog our memories a little bit in terms of like the improvement that this Magic team saw underneath Jamahl Mosley this past season. So compared to last year, where the Magic went 34-48, this year they finished 47-35, 13-win improvement on the year. They went from 20-21 at home a season ago to 29-12 this year, 9-win improvement there. And they went from 14-27 on the road to 18-23 this season on the road. So they didn't see really a big improvement on the road. Like if you look at like, oh my gosh, 13-win improvement, right? Like they probably were quite a bit better at home and quite a bit better on the road. They were just barely better on the road, but they were just so much better at home this season. Taking a look at some of the advanced metrics, all this stuff is rated per 100 possessions. Last year, the Magic were 26th in offensive rating. They had an offensive rating of 111.3. Now this year, remember, the Magic lost their lead assistant and like their most offensive-minded assistant, Nate Tibbetts, to the WNBA. He left to coach in the WNBA really at the beginning of the season. So without his lead assistant, he went from 26th in offensive rating last year to this year 22nd in offensive rating with a offensive rating of 112.9. Some of the personnel and like the internal improvements of the roster certainly helped. In terms of defense, the Magic were 18th in defensive rating last year with a defensive rating of 113.7. This year, they were third in defensive rating with a defensive rating of 110.8. Last season, Luke, to me, the next few stats I'm going to go through are really the most interesting. Last year, they were 15-16 against teams below 500. This year, they were 28-7 against teams below 500. Just this year, there was no messing around. Like, you're playing a bad team, you've got to take care of business, and the Magic overwhelmingly did that this season. However, they were 19-32 last year against teams above 500. This year, they were 19-28 against teams above 500. So still not really being able to get to that next level. I think getting to that next level, you're just going to have to start beating better teams. You're going to have to start beating really good teams. But this year, the Magic played who were in front of them, and whether they're at home or on the road or whatever, took care of business against teams below 500, took care of home court. If you want to take a big step as a team, that's like one of the first things that you have to do. You have to win at home. You have to beat bad teams. But they are still struggling against good teams, and I think we realized that all throughout the season. Compared to last year, where they were 19-25 in total clutch games, so that's 44 clutch games. This year, they were 21-14, so they played in 35 clutch games this year. So they played in less clutch games, and they were better in clutch games. As our friend Philip Rossman-Reich over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com and Locked On Magic always says, good teams don't win close games, they avoid them. And the Magic did a good job of improving, avoiding those close games, but they were also much better this year in those close games. So this is just, a ton of numbers. I don't think it tells the entire story on the job that Jamahl Mosley did this past season, But Luke, what are your feelings of Jamahl Mosley and compared to last year?
I think just like the roster rotation changes that Mosley had the boldness to make this year really showed me that he's settling into his role. You first think of, like, regardless of the fact that he reverted back, right? You think about Jonathan Isaac starting that final game, starting in the playoffs, the first couple games, and also having like I don't know if like humbleness is the word or whatever it might be, but having the boldness to start Jonathan Isaac and try something new in a pivotal time like the playoffs and the last game of the year, which was essentially win or you go to the play-in, and then to backtrack and be like, you know what, that was wrong. I'm gonna go. That didn't work. Maybe that wasn't wrong. Is the wrong thing to say there, but that didn't work. Let me go back to what we were doing, right? I think that was just one sign of the growth that Jamahl Mosley has had as a coach and really finding himself, really settling in with Orlando. And then on top of that comes also in the playoffs. The way that he coached, I think he absolutely outcoached Bickerstaff in that series. And I think it was very clear that he did that. And obviously, when improvements year over year, you can talk about that. But for me, it was just like how comfortable he was this year with making adjustments and being confident in those things. Now, of course, obviously, he leaves things to be desired, but like, doesn't every coach that's only a few years in? And the growth that he has shown and the respect and being second coach of the year voting, that's not a small thing. So for him to do that with this young of a team, making more with less, like during the injury stretch, Anthony Black goes into the starting lineup, right? That took a lot of boldness as well, if we're still talking in that vein. And then for him to be like, and regardless of what you think, for him to be like, okay, we're back to health, full health. AB, you're going back to basically not playing. And you know that there was probably multiple conversations about, should we just play Anthony Black? Should we do this? And just continue on with that because we're getting pressure from whoever, right? The fan base, maybe other coaches on staff, maybe people in the front office about Anthony Black. But Jamahl Mosley ultimately stuck to his guns there, and that you could argue that was a front office decision. But then another thing you think about with Goga, obviously, kind of same scenario as AB, and also Markelle Fultz, to ultimately decide it's best if he just comes off the bench. And to his credit, Markelle Fultz was great in the playoffs in a bench role. So all of those things, like the theme there is just that Jamahl Mosley sticks to his guns. What he thinks is right and what his team decides is right, his assistant coaches that he's got alongside him, they're confident in what they do. And I just think that is an area of growth, or maybe just an opportunity that he was able to feel like, okay, I'm in a position to do this now. I'm here a few years in. I've got the reins. I'm fully trusted, and I'm not going to get questioned about, this or that from the front office or whoever it might be. I just thought he showed a lot of poise this year.
Yeah, when you look at the big picture with Jamahl, going back to the beginning of the season, like losing your lead assistant right at the beginning of the year, like that's a massive blow. And then the reason that I felt it was appropriate to put Jamahl Mosley and the front office really in the same, not the same conversation, but like on the same episode as we continue to grade these, is because it's really hard to evaluate one without the other. Like, yeah, the front office looks great because look at how the team improved. But yeah, you probably don't get there without Jamahl Mosley and his staff and the way that they've coached up everybody. And then, look at Jamahl Mosley and the way that he's like, playing and playing these guys and, pulling the different levers. Well, the front office also constructed this team and gave him this roster. So they sort of go hand in hand. But when I sit down and think about like what we expected from this team at the beginning of the year, number one, everybody would agree that this team like greatly exceeded expectations. Sure, they ended up fifth. We were talking at the beginning of the season about it would be great for this team to reach the play-in. And then we got to the point of, it will be a disappointment if this team plays in the play-in. And then with 11 or 12 days to go in the regular season, you had a real chance at being the 2 or the 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. So when you just look at like the expectations of the team, obviously Jamahl Mosley had a huge hand in that. And what would I expect out of Jamahl Mosley in terms of like growth? Like you expected him to be better with the rotations. Just expect him to continue to help these guys develop. And we did see growth, especially from guys like Paolo, like Jalen Suggs. Maybe we didn't see as much as we wanted to from other guys. Maybe like a Franz Wagner to a certain extent with the shooting, although like we talked about on the last episode, almost everything else was much better than it was last year. You look at a guy like Wendell Carter Jr., Markelle Fultz, those guys were dealing with injuries seemingly the entire season. So there's nuance that needs to be mentioned in these conversations that we're not making excuses for people, but it just like it's the reality of this situation. It is what it is. It's not really fair to make blanket statements without evaluating all of those other pieces. But all in all, I thought Jamahl Mosley did a great job. Contrary to what people believe, like Fazan, our guy, writes, for the site and is one of the best follows on Orlando Magic Twitter, who goes and like just pours over every ounce of film after each game. Contrary to what people believe, like Jamahl Mosley does run offense, like he does run sets. He runs a lot of sets, trying to find ways to improve this team and improve the offense, and it tries to be as creative as he can given the roster and the personnel that's currently on this team. So overall, when it comes to Jamahl Mosley, you mentioned finished second in Coach of the Year voting. So everybody watching this league and going into this season with the expectations or lack thereof, looked at this guy and said, this guy has absolutely been one of the very best coaches in the league this year, gets this team to the playoffs. Was Jamahl Mosley perfect at every juncture and every turn this year? No. There were still questions that we had and things that, in the moment were probably fair, criticisms of in-game management and decisions towards the end of games. He still has time to improve there. But overall this year, I was really impressed with Jamahl Mosley. I think I have him at like a B+. You can give your grade here. But like, Jamahl Mosley, in my opinion, like I know we've talked about this, that the Coach of the Year award is like a 1-year award. But if you look at the work that he's been doing over the last 3 years, to me, like the body of work is what has led up to this. And the way that he's been able to lead these guys the first couple of years, the fact that like they had a big breakthrough, although it was more than even the most optimistic Magic fan thought was possible, this was still a result of the work that he's been putting in with these guys over the course of the past 2 years. So I wasn't like blown away by my expectations like of Jamahl Mosley this year, because I did think he was a good coach and this team was on the right track. So I give Jamahl Mosley a B+ probably isn't even fair. Like maybe like an A or A- for Jamahl.
Yeah, I was going to say A-. My expectation, it wasn't just that we would take a win jump, which I believe that I said 42-40 before the year started. So he even exceeded that. And even that, some people outside of Orlando fans and the national media at that point would have said that maybe that was that was too overzealous, right? Vegas had us at what, like 36.5? Something like that. So he overachieved even my expectations that were, maybe you could have said optimistic, but at the same time, clearly they were realistic in hindsight for what this team did and how they improved. So for me, because Jamahl Mosley even exceeded that with these guys, with going on a 9-game win streak without a couple key guys on your team that early in the year, is super impressive. To go out and beat Denver and then the next game to go out and beat Boston during that win streak, it's like that's all, in my opinion, the confidence and the things that have been instilled in these players. Like, yeah, some of it's what they brought in, like their mentality is awesome, and that probably obviously goes to credit to the front office. But Jamahl Mosley is constantly uplifting these guys. We know he's a player's coach. We know he cares about the people on that team, on that roster, not just what can they do for him. And that all plays in to the fact that these guys overachieved this year. This doesn't happen without Coach Jamahl Mosley. And because of that, that's absolutely why I'm landing on an A-.
Yeah, just credit all the way around to Jamahl. You mentioned the fact that, early in the season, you lose guys, put guys into the rotation. Seemed like the right button to push at that moment with AB and Goga. And then he has the difficult decision once Wendell come back of, hey, what do I do with these other guys? And making the tough decision. Maybe we don't necessarily agree with, especially Anthony Black being pushed back to the bench, but with how good he was playing, there's no way that could have been an easy decision for Jamahl to say, look, man, you stepped in, you played really well, stepped up for this team and delivered, but this is just the way that it is. You're going to go back to the bench. And although, maybe, if we're arguing, did this team, squeeze every win out of this season that they could have? I think you could argue that with other choices when it comes to the rotation and the guard rotation. In certain games, maybe things could have gone, a different way in maybe a handful of games. But that's just like you said, if you're clearly nitpicking, you can get upset about things like that. But Jamahl Mosley and really we're talking about the whole staff, they did such an incredible job. If you go back and you look at, the double overtime loss in Sacramento or the win the next game in Denver, that stuff does not happen without good coaching and being able to coach guys up and always preaching that next man up mentality. Guys go out in that Sacramento game. You see Chuma Okeke obviously step up in a big way in that game, Caleb Houston, and those guys again, in that game against Denver. That stuff does not happen without good coaching, right? You don't hang in multiple games like that. Obviously that Sacramento game was really crazy from an offensive standpoint for both teams. And then the next game, you're in Denver going against the reigning champs, missing a third or almost half of your roster and pulling out a big win like that. It just doesn't happen without the culture and the expectation that this team is built and is set with these players. So I thought Jamahl Mosley and his staff did an incredible job. Are there still areas of growth, areas that we would like to see improvement? Definitely, right? It's sort of difficult because it did feel like in a way Jamal's hands were sort of tied in certain situations, when it comes to Anthony Black or some of these other guys. And you have to wonder if Jamahl Mosley could just, I'm not saying he wasn't able to do this, but I do ask, what would this team look like if Jamahl Mosley was just able to do whatever he wanted and didn't have to worry about anything? And it feels like we're getting to the point with this team, and I guess this will be a good segue into the conversation about the front office in a minute, but we should be getting to the point where there aren't really any more excuses to be had, right? This front office, they inherit this team, right? The Frank Vogel year, they have a year of evaluating, then they decide, okay, this guy probably isn't the right guy. They bring in Steve Clifford, and then it seems like there is a mandate from either upper management or ownership that says, hey, we haven't been to the playoffs in 6 seasons. We're tired of losing. We need to go all in, make a playoff run. And the front office made moves to achieve that goal. And then when they decide hey, we might be at our ceiling because of certain decisions that were made by the previous front office regime, their hands were still sort of tied to a certain aspect, but they started to take this team and sort of mold it and make it their own. And I feel like this is the first offseason, which again, this is going to be a good segue to talk about the front office, but this is really the first offseason where it's all right, all bets are off. We can really do what we need to do here. And previous mistakes or decisions by the last regime, there's no excuses at this point. Everything from here moving forward is going to be hey, this is all you guys. Look, I don't know if there's anything that you want to add about Jamahl before we take a quick break and talk about the front office, but I do have that question still hey, what is this team going to look like where Jamahl Mosley is put in the absolute best position and is just told don't worry about anything but winning games, because it does seem like maybe there were some other factors influencing some of the decisions that Jamahl Mosley had to make this year.
Yeah, nothing else to add. Valid point on your end, and no, that's it for me on Mose.
All right, let's take a quick break just to talk about our patrons. They're the folks that help keep the lights on, help make each and every episode and every event that we do possible. If you would like to join the Patreon, you want to help support the show, you've been listening for a while, and you want to be a part of the community, part of our Discord community as well, with certain tiers that we have available there, you get access to our Discord channel. If you would like to learn more or potentially join the Patreon, you can find us at patreon.com/the6man show. We give a very special shout out to our elite tier patrons and Hall of Fame tier patrons each and every episode. So let's go ahead and start with Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Ellis, Jonathan Borges, Normal, Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Francis Warmth, Pierre A, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey Danimal, Bobby Skinner, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Dalek Lopez, Fuchsia, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95, Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Rican, Shahin 177, Bobby the Dawn, Himlo Ben Himro, R Improv 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Kid 714, Mysterious Mosley, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Walsh, Fritz, Bruv Sal, Cason Green, Santi Leon, Kane Eckler, The Distracted Ma Timsa, Chantu, Tom Gadsden, Dead Air, Richard Tuttle, Jeremiah Quintero, Debo 1980, Magic Matt, Michael Thompson, Mama Richmond, Next Snappa, What's Up Playoffs 2024, Dylan Fay, David Duppy, Smith Sheiks, Bueno Time, Stantino 1995, Suggs Muggs, Derek Smith, Daniel Anderson, Barry, and Mac Canny. A big shout out to all of our patrons. You can find us at patreon.com/the6man show. Now on to the front office, Luke. Obviously, Jeff Weltman been at the helm for quite some time now. The beginning of this season, John Hammond is transitioning more into like a senior advisory role. Anthony Parker was promoted to general manager. And then I just thought it would be helpful to really go through the list of transactions that the Magic made this year. And then we'll also mention a couple of transactions that the Magic didn't make, because those factor into this as well. Drafted Anthony Black with the 6th pick in last June's draft. Drafted Jet Howard 11th overall in last year's draft. The Magic traded the 36th pick in this draft, which turned out to be Andre Jackson Jr. They exercised the club option for Goga Bitadze back in June. They declined a club option for Michael Carter-Williams. They declined a team option for Admiral Schofield in June, but then they signed him to a two-way contract in July. Signed Jet Howard and Anthony Black to their rookie scale contracts. We talked about Anthony Parker being promoted to general manager. They signed Mo Wagner to a 2-year, $16 million deal, which includes a team option for this upcoming season. They signed Joe Ingles, which was sort of an unexpected deal right there at the beginning of free agency. They signed Joe Ingles to a 2-year, $22 million contract, which includes a team option for this upcoming season here. Signed a slew of guys to Exhibit 10 contracts, most notably Mac McClung and Trevelyan Queen. Those guys, obviously, Trevelyan Queen spent some time with the Orlando Magic. Mac McClung ended up being the G League MVP this past year. No brainer, but they exercised the 2024-2025 $12.16 million option for Paolo Banchero. Duh, of course. They exercised Jalen Suggs' $9.19 million option for next year as well, and exercised Franz Wagner's $7 million option for next year. Signed Cole Anthony to a 3-year, $39 million rookie contract extension just before the season started. That's really a 2-year deal, and then the 3rd year is a team option. That extension does not start until next season, however. So when you're like, oh, that's 4 seasons from now, that's why, because the extension hasn't kicked in just yet. And then in March, just a couple of weeks before the regular season ended, they signed Jamahl Mosley to a 4-year contract extension. A couple of things that they did not do. They have not at least not yet, extended Gary Harris, Markelle Fultz, or Chuma Okeke. Chuma Okeke is set to be a restricted free agent this offseason. And then Gary Harris and Markelle Fultz are both going to be unrestricted free agents this year. Luke, what is your evaluation of the front office this year?
Well, I mean, it's hard, like you said. The coach and the front office often go hand in hand, and the success is reflected on each other. So if if you're thinking about the front office, they've already got a leg up because the Magic finished well above expectation. And if we're talking the last calendar year, in the last year and what they've done since basically like the last offseason, you brought in Joe Ingles, who, despite the postseason and contributions there, you can absolutely say Joe Ingles was a positive addition to this team. Like, he might at this point be a regular season player, and then you have his leadership in the playoffs, because that has been very well known and very apparent that Joe Ingles is very vocal and brings guys under his wing, and it's just an all around great dude to have on the roster. So that alone, like that was a good signing by all accounts by this front office, and really got this whole thing started for the upcoming, for this past season. And then you just look at I guess I fast forward there to the deadline. This comes maybe my only like real critique of the front office in this last year, where I'm thinking we should have done this, right? We should have made a move for a point guard, say, I don't know, Tyus Jones. And maybe you guys have heard of him. But I was hoping that they would do that move. And I totally, I get it. Coming up, you have another shot at Tyus Jones this offseason. But, and part of me does wonder, was there not really much interest from Tyus Jones' camp? And that's why this trade didn't happen. And the Magic front office kind of backed off. If that's it, then it is what it is. And we'll find out this summer, right? If the Magic do offer Tyus Jones or whatever it might be, or he signs, whatever. I just think that making that trade would have guaranteed a Magic first round win. You were that piece away this season from winning that round, I think. So that's my only real critique for this front office this year. And you're going into this offseason in an incredible spot. You're in every conversation for basically anybody that's a free agent. Like, these guys are linking you to everybody. And so for me, it's hard to really grade this front office negatively. I don't know how you really can. And as a result, I probably, for the front office, I'm going to be giving them an A. Like, the trade and what I wish happened at the deadline really is kind of nitpicking. And you go from there, you see what they do this offseason. But if you're talking about setting yourself up for success, it happened, right? Like, they set us up for success, even down to Cole Anthony's third year on that extension being a club option. They are so good about that. They earn the players' trust as well, that they're going to be treated fairly come that time. It's going to be a fair decision. It's a business decision, but it'll be fair. And they're not just going to screw these guys. So for me, it's front office that gets an A for me.
See, I disagree just slightly. I don't feel like talking about the trade deadline is nitpicking, and this is why. It's the front office's job to maximize every asset possible. And it's not so much about what you didn't get in maybe a Tyus Jones or whoever or a Buddy Hield, or whatever name is at the top of your head. For me, it's just more about you're getting nothing for Markelle Fultz and Gary Harris. And it's quite possible that a guy like Markelle Fultz just maybe wasn't really valued that much around the league and you couldn't get much for him. Gary Harris, on the other hand, I have to think that you could have gotten something in return for Gary Harris. And sure, you could be like, okay, well, if let's say the best you could get was a second round pick for Gary Harris. Okay, I can understand the thinking of not making that move. But ultimately, right, we all went into this season with the understanding of, hey, this season really isn't about this season. This season is about setting this team up for future seasons. And in that regard, it does feel like this team left a little bit on the table, right? Like you talk about Tyus Jones, if you make that move, potentially that ends up in a first round series victory. I don't know that it gets you there, but I could see how that could have helped, right? Like I think a big problem in that series was at times the Magic just did not have a lead guard and another guy to take the offensive pressure off of a guy like Paolo Banchero. And then Franz Wagner played really well in some games, didn't play well in others. Jalen Suggs, really the same thing. Cole Anthony, the same thing. Markel, like you go up and down the roster, it's like, hey, like sure, you showed up in this game, but hey, this other game when Paolo needed anybody to help, nobody could really step up and try to get this team over the hump. So I do think there's something to that thinking of like by not pulling the trigger on a guy, to move off of Gary Harris or Markelle Fultz or whoever it is to try to improve this team in the middle of the season. It felt like you left a little bit, on the bone there. And what does that do, in free agency if you are able to pull off a first round, upset? Are even more teams like guys maybe that aren't even free agents, guys that are just thinking about getting out of whatever situation that they're in. All of a sudden, does Orlando become a more appealing destination? So maybe is there an element of nitpicking to that when like relative to the way that the team outperformed their expectations and just the overall the way that the team performed this year? Yes, but the front office's job is to squeeze like every ounce of juice out of every asset that they possibly can. And in two assets in particular, Markelle Fultz and Gary Harris, it looks like you're going to lose those guys for nothing. So in a certain respect, maybe they sacrificed the immediate future, maybe not like this season immediate future, but maybe the start of next season immediate future for trying to make sure that you made the playoffs this year. And it's a nuanced thing, right? Because like there are pros and cons to both sides of things there. But if somebody was going to criticize the front office and say like, yeah, they did a great job, but like now you're not going to get anything from Markelle, you're not going to get anything from Gary. I do see that. So for me, I give the front office like a solid B or a B plus, because I do think that is the one thing that you could criticize the front office for is sort of sitting on those assets.
To be fair, we have decided Gary Harris and Fultz are gone.
Right. True.
So who knows? Like, who knows? Maybe
sure.
They just
if those guys come back, then first of all, if one of those guys comes back, we're really going to have an issue, I think, on our hands. But like, I'll just say, if Gary comes back at a relatively low number, then it's like, okay, I understand why you didn't move Gary.
We've already seen Gary come back, right?
Right.
We've already seen him say, and then even his exit interviews, like there's nothing he said there.
There's a lot of we talk.
Yeah. So I think it's possible that he comes back as like a just strictly bench guy. And to be honest, that'd be okay with me. Like I know that would rub maybe some people the wrong way, maybe take minutes away from younger guys. And you can argue that, whatever, right? But that's my point. We have said that we think Gary and Fultz are gone. Yes, obviously I echo your sentiment on that.
If you were a betting man,
yeah,
are they gone?
They're gone.
Yeah,
but why did this front office not move off of them for a second round pick then? If they're gone, to squeeze it. And the other option is that they ultimately were undecided about what they're going to do with those guys. They're like, let's just stand pat, see how the rest of the year plays out. And if we could listen, man,
that would be concerning to me though.
Sure, but you're talking about trading them for a second round pick, but also like these guys don't care about a second round pick.
Yeah, I
They've got
get it.
Capital. They've got capital. They don't need a couple more second round picks. You know what I mean? So we will see how it plays out. I won't be shocked if either of them walk or both of them walk because the front office allows them to. And I won't be shocked if Gary Harris comes back and Markelle Fultz is gone. I will be shocked I will be irritated if both come back, because then you really are taking away from younger players, right? So you can't bring both of them back. And I don't know, but playing devil's advocate, yeah, we don't really know for certain where they're at or where they were at around deadline time. And I still wouldn't be super shocked if yeah, like I said, if Gary's back on like a bench role veteran basis, and that's what you're looking at. So yeah, we'll see what happens, but I don't. That's why I called it nitpicking at the deadline, because I don't know where their head's at.
Really quickly, I want to ask you what you think this team does. Mo Wagner's $8 million team option this year. Pick up or decline?
Pick up.
Joe Ingles, $11 million team option.
Dude, gone, renounced.
So do you, this, Kevin and I talked about this on the last episode, but what I would like to see is them decline that team option and sign him to like a 2-year, $12 million kind of, or even like a 1-year, $6 million deal. Like, like the dude's 37 years old. I don't like, you're going to have a 39-year-old on this roster in a couple of years. I have some real, doubts about that, but
well, yeah, I don't think that would be outlandish to think that Joe Ingles is cool with that. Joe's played at the highest levels, right? Like he has played on big stages. Joe also just like, yeah, he's good, right? Like he can ride off into the sunset in beautiful sunny Florida with no state income tax. He tends to, I think from what we've seen, he likes Florida. So I wouldn't be shocked if that does happen. And then he plays one more year with the Magic. Maybe he goes and retires with a team that he, with it, whether it's Utah or whatever. Or if he just simply rides off to the sunset, retires as the Magic. I wouldn't be shocked if he plays one more season, 2 more seasons. I'd probably say 1 more season, and then he's probably retiring.
And he has literally said, like, hey, if Jamahl decides he doesn't want me, like, next year I'll be playing for Osceola. So those are his words verbatim. Right. So what I wouldn't hate is Joe Ingles plays another year, retires, and then accepts some kind of like advisory or like assistant, coach role. If he still wants to be around the team, still wants to travel a little bit, make a decent living for himself, all that kind of stuff. And then let's just put it all out, on the table here. What do you think that it's so hard to predict, like, who do the Magic go out and sign? What do you expect us to do with like the guys that are on the roster, like guys that are eligible for, extensions or are going to be free agents? Talking about like Goga, who is an unrestricted free agent, Markel, unrestricted free agent, Gary, unrestricted free agent, Franz Wagner, extension eligible, Jalen Suggs, extension eligible, Chuma Okeke, restricted free agent. What do you think we do with those guys?
The biggest pieces to me are Jonathan Isaac and Fultz. Like those are your biggest things, because ultimately those are what are going to determine cap space for you this offseason. So for me, you said think, not want. Is that correct?
You could give me either. You could give me both.
I think obviously you keep J.I.
Okay, I thought this episode was really about to go off the rails here. You scared. No. I wasn't even thinking about Jonathan Isaac, the fact that his $17.4 million are not fully guaranteed yet.
Yeah,
I'm pulling up the due date on that. Essentially, it becomes fully guaranteed not until January 10th. But yeah.
Ultimately, like thinking about Keith Smith, a tweet that he put out less than a month ago, talking about like what, here are the primary cap situations for Orlando. The waive Isaac, renounce Fultz option could get you about $65.8 million.
There's just there's no point in having that much cap space this year.
Yeah, there's no point in having that much cap space. Like we know that. Like there's the free agency class just isn't that strong, no matter who you're interested in, unless you're going to do something irresponsible. But like I think to that point, like you're definitely keeping Isaac. I'm going to say that you renounce Fultz. I think that's both what I would like and what this front office will do. Uh, Mo Wagner, I think you keep Goga. It depends on that center position, what this front office does. I think if you're keeping Dell around and you're signing a center, you could put Dell on the bench and a center, whoever that is, whether that's Hartenstein or Claxton or whoever at starting center, and then you could let Goga walk. Like, but there is part of me with Wendell being like, how much will he be available? Would it be nice to have a third string guy? But then you have Mo Wagner, so it's like in the regular season, in most games, Mo Wagner would be fine in that role. So I do think that Goga could be gone. Can you list a couple more of those?
No, Chuma, Okeke, Franz Wagner, Jalen Suggs.
I mean, yeah, you're doing whatever with Franz. I think you're giving him the max there, obviously, and with Chuma, I mean, probably gone. Like it's been made clear he's done as far as actions that we've seen, such as Chuma not playing. So yeah, from those standpoints, those are kind of my takes on those ends.
Yeah, I think the only one like Jalen, like I obviously you're going to extend Jalen. I wouldn't be shocked to see him come at like around $20 million a year, somewhere in that ballpark. I've talked about obviously you're maxing Franz. Chuma is gone. Goga is an interesting one just because I feel like he's a guy that could be in line for a pay raise from another team, given the way that he performed when Wendell was out and the way that the Magic played when Wendell was out with Goga in the lineup. So he might just be looking for like, hey, like I want to be a legitimate backup, or I don't think a team is going to pay him a starting salary. But if he's sold that another team's like, hey, you're going to be our full-time backup five, and we're going to, pay you $8 million a year or whatever the case may be. Like if a team can give him that and guarantee him that, that's not something I think the Magic can guarantee him, because if you do go out and you upgrade at center, well, then you still have Wendell and Mo Wagner. And even if you stick with Wendell, you're not going to just completely sit Mo Wagner. Like that's not going to happen. So I think Goga is most likely gone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I think that ultimately, I don't know if this is like ego driven to say this or just confidence in it. I think like what I expect and what I want this front office to do kind of align with like those moves that we just talked about. I think they do go after, with the cap space that they're going to likely have, I think they do go after a starting center. And I think they do go after a point guard that can, as Paolo stated himself, want someone that can set the table. I think they're going to do it. And dude, Tyus Jones is the most obvious signing that we could have. Like, can shoot the ball like 41% last year on like 4 attempts a game or something, and can set the table. 7 assists, 1 turnover. I'm at the point where I've looked at this dude's basketball reference so many times, think I could say it in my sleep, but like 7 assists, 1 turnover, led the league in assist to turnover again. And what he drops off defensively for you, he's going to give you productivity wise. And the fact that he had those assist to turnover ratios on the freaking Wizards, in some instances made those guys look good. That's a hard thing to do. That's a really bad team in Washington. And he was able to do that and not turn the ball over, not get sloppy, and at how fast paced that team plays. Super impressive all the way around. I understand defensively he leaves a lot to be desired, but it all goes back to what JJ Redick said about the Magic and adding an offensive talent. At some point, you're going to have to add a guy offensively where you lose things defensively. You're going to have to sacrifice on the defensive end. And I think the identity is established enough that you go out and you get Tyus Jones. So I know that I have said Tyus Jones' name on this podcast probably 70 times in the last 6 months, but get used to it. you guys got me till July, and I'm going to talk about Tyus Jones until he's on their freaking Orlando Magic. It just makes sense. So I think, yes, ultimately, we've gotten a little bit off track here, but like Tyus Jones or alike, right? There's some talk with D'Angelo Russell. I don't know that I love it, but if he got signed, it's D'Angelo Russell. Like, I get it. Like, people love to hate D'Angelo Russell. But you talk about a scoring guard, like he can do it. And yeah, I don't know. It'd be one of those things where he's on the level of Klay Thompson, so don't get it twisted. But I talked about a few episodes ago, like, hey, I don't really want Klay Thompson. But if he were to sign and I was to get that notification that like the Magic signed Klay Thompson, would I be excited? Absolutely. It feels kind of the same with D'Angelo Russell, where like I don't really want it. But if it happens, there's obviously like there's going to be a part of me that just reads that. I'm like, whoa.
Well, I think what you get excited about is like, okay, what does the best case scenario look like with this signing? And that's what gets you excited. But like, unfortunately, reality is going to be somewhere in between best and worst case scenario with those guys. And that's why for me, like they're stayaways. The last thing that I want to add is we've talked about Isaiah Hartenstein, Nick Claxton, those being some of the, big names in terms of the center market in this year's free agency class. Reports have come out for both of those guys that they're looking, anywhere from like 18 to 25 million per year. And I understand why on its face, like why that value scares people. For me, if I'm convinced that, those guys are going to work out here and they're going to be good fits and so on and so forth, when you look at what the cap is going to be doing over the next couple of years, like 3 years from now, the cap is going to raise like $40 million. And within the next like 6 or 7 years, the cap is going to raise by like $100 million. It's going to be like almost $250 million, like 6 or 7 seasons from now. And when you look at like what some of these contract like comparisons are going to be in the next 4 to 5 years, like $20 million is going to be the new like $12 million. Like that's how much the cap is going to raise. So if the Magic sign one of these guys, and especially if they're able to like front load these deals and you get Hartenstein for like 4 years, $80 million, I understand on its face it sounds crazy, but when you look at the amount of cap room that the Magic have, all of their upcoming deals, they're going to be able to have bird rights for Jalen Suggs, for Paolo, for Franz. Those extensions aren't going to, kick in, especially Paolo's extension isn't going to kick in for another 3 years from now. So when you look at all of that, like signing a big deal at this point for guys like that, especially if you're expecting these guys to be starters, right? It's really not that bad. Like I don't want anybody, getting their pitchfork and torches out if the Magic sign Isaiah Hartenstein to like a 4-year, $80 million, or even like a 5-year, $100 million deal.
I think it could be like 4 for 90. So like 22
that would be great. But I'm just saying, like if you see that number, don't all of a sudden freak out. Like keep in mind the financial flexibility that we will still have in place, but also the way that the cap is going to rise over the next several years. It's like we're going to be seeing $100 million contracts in like the next
year.
Yeah. $100 million contracts within the next like 10 to 12 years. Like that is going to happen. So just keep that in mind.
That's so much money.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah. No, but yeah, so front office, great job. On my end. And you've given us a reason to be excited this offseason. So please don't disappoint us.
I would agree with that. So, all right. I think that's going to do it for this one. I know we've been talking about this, but our next episode, we're really going to start diving more into the draft. Draft is coming up now in just over 3 weeks, 3.5 weeks, something like that. So we'll start taking a look at the prospects that are expected to be in the Magic's range there. We've already seen the New Orleans Pelicans, who were owed a first-round draft pick by the Los Angeles Lakers due to the Anthony Davis trade. They're like, nah, we're going to defer that to next year. So there's been a lot of talk about this draft that it might not be so great. Some people think it's pretty good, but not spectacular. Some people, like the New Orleans Pelicans, they might just think that this draft absolutely sucks and they would rather have a first-round pick in next year's draft. It's probably happened before. I don't recall a team being owed a first-round draft pick that is deferred it to another year. I don't remember that ever happening. In the moment, I was like, wait, they're going to do what? It's like, man, they must really think that this draft sucks. So, but we're going to dive more into that. We'll talk more about that on the next episode. We'll get some guests in here, get their opinions as well. Luke, that's it for me. I don't know if you have any additional thoughts before we wrap this one up.
No, go Magic.
Go Magic, as always. For Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to the Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!